I've just been watching this video by Qualia Soup called Burden of Proof. Makes really great videos, Qualia Soup. He made a series on transaction analysis a while back, really good. But the point that jumped out to me was this, the phrase self-evident. And he gives the example of this particular, I guess, a Christian apologist or a theologian, talking about how the burden of proof for the non-existence of God lies with the atheist. He said this person has claimed that it's the atheist's job to prove that God doesn't exist because God is self-evident. Self-evident. And of course it isn't self-evident to all of us. It's certainly not self-evident to me or to anybody who has any kind of atheistic leanings. But clearly for some people it is. And that's something that's quite interesting for me. So I've been trying to think about, again, how to occupy that, how to imagine that position, how to think what must it be like to feel that God is a self-evident, presuppositionalist concept, I guess. And the nearest I've got to it is by an analogy, really, and using the stock philosophical character of zombies. Zombies, in philosophical terms, are imaginary beings which have appear like us from the outside, do all the things that humans do, but they have no inner life. There's no consciousness going on there. So Daniel Dennett, for example, talks a lot about zombies. Chalmers talks a lot about people who work in consciousness studies use zombies quite a bit as part of thought experiments because they're quite useful to kind of run simulations of philosophical ideas through. So I'm just imagining zombies applied to this. Suppose if it transpired that this country where I live, or this town where I live, or the whole world maybe, is primarily occupied actually by zombies. They just look like you and me. They do all the things that you and I do, but the lights on. There's no lights on inside. There's no inner perspective. There's no narrative going on. They don't have that sense of being alive in a way that we have, but they do and say everything else exactly the same. And then they overhear us, these zombies. They overhear you and I talking about ourselves, and talking about what it is to have consciousness, and talking about introspection, and talking about all the things that people talk about when they have those kind of conversations. And all these zombies say, "What are you talking about?" So that thing doesn't exist, they say. Three quarters of the population say that thing doesn't exist. That self that you're talking about doesn't exist. And of course we, having complete knowledge of this self and occupying it most of it all the time we're awake, we say, of course it is. It's self-evident that we have an inner life. It's self-evident that we have first-person perspective. It's self-evident that we have this intentionality and we have this kind of narrative core to our being and this feeling sense. It's self-evident. It's evidence of self that is evidencing the self. What do we say to that? What do we say to the zombies to convince them that self exists? Is the burden of proof on us to prove that self exists? Because we're making, from their perspective, the extraordinary claim. They're in the majority, don't forget. Or would we be justified in saying to the zombies, no, the burden of proof is on you to prove that this self, this feeling that I have inside my head right now, the burden of proof is on you to prove that that doesn't exist. I haven't worked it out yet. Tell me what you think.